The morning sunlight filtered through the silk curtains of James Blackwood's penthouse, casting a soft glow over the elegant furniture and marble finishes that adorned the space. James, a 32-year-old man with piercing eyes and a charming smile that rarely faded, sat at the edge of the bed, glancing at his wristwatch. Each second seemed to weigh more than usual. Today was the day. In the center of the room, the luxurious apartment, with its panoramic view of the city, felt like an extension of his own ambition. James was the epitome of what many considered the height of success, a rising magnate with a business empire expanding by the month. But behind this facade of wealth and prestige, there was a meeting that could change everything. He stood up with a calm determination, his tie perfectly adjusted to his collar. Today's meeting was crucial. It was the pivotal moment for the most ambitious project of his career. If everything went according to plan, he would secure a significant investment, a giant step towards solidifying his place among the industry's greats. James took a brief look around, noting the meticulous perfection of his world. The sports car in the garage, the tailored suits, and the dedicated team were all ready to support his status. But as he prepared to leave, an inexplicable feeling of unease began to set in. There was something about the morning that felt different, as if the universe was about to turn a page he couldn't foresee. With one last look at the office full of contracts and projects, James grabbed his phone and headed for the elevator, ready to face the day that would define his future. The fast pace of the city outside wasn't just the backdrop, but a constant reminder of what was at stake. Every traffic light, every horn, seemed to intensify the pressure he felt. He was about to take a major step to secure his legacy, but fate had different plans for him. And so, with the city pulsing around him and the meeting approaching, James set out, unaware that the true test of his life was about to begin. Not in the corridors of power, but on the unexpected streets where destiny awaited him. James dove into the day's routine with calculated precision. As he stepped into his sleek, black sports car, the engine roared with an authority that matched his status. He adjusted the rearview mirror and took one last glance at the tablet with his presentation slides. Every chart, every number, was etched into his mind, but he couldn't afford to falter. Today was the day that could redefine his career. However, what should have been a quick and smooth journey turned into a maze of metal and smoke. Traffic was at a standstill, a chaotic scene that seemed almost symbolic of what he was about to face. The cars were jammed together in a tangled mess of shiny metal, all trying to move forward but barely making any progress. The red lights seemed to flash mockingly, as if the entire city was taunting his desire to arrive on time. James glanced at his watch, the anxiety growing with every passing minute. He ran his hand over the steering wheel, trying to stay calm, but the thought of his meeting approaching while he remained stuck in gridlock only added to the pressure on his shoulders. The traffic seemed endless, and he began to feel a twinge of frustration. He tried to use the time to mentally review his key points, visualizing each slide, every argument, but anxiety was starting to take over. The radio, which usually provided a pleasant distraction, now felt like an irritation. The breaking news sounded like a distant echo, insignificant amidst the noise of the traffic. With each passing second, the city seemed to intensify its frantic pace. The urban chaos mirrored the storm brewing in James's mind. The car horns around him blared like a collective cry of frustration, mixing with the sound of a siren from an emergency vehicle speeding by. The feeling that he was losing control of a situation he usually mastered was growing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was only a few minutes, the traffic began to move slowly. James seized the opportunity, pressing the accelerator with renewed determination. He knew time was against him, and that his reputation was on the line. With every kilometer covered, he got closer to the meeting that would define his future. But the chaos around him seemed determined to test his patience and focus. Fate was pushing him to a limit he hadn't anticipated, and as he continued his journey through the turbulent city, James couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. As James maneuvered the car through the congested streets, his eyes fixed on the clock and the road ahead, a sudden and shocking sight caught his attention. On the sidewalk, in a shadowy corner of the street, something unusual drew his gaze. If you're enjoying the story so far, leave a like and comment below what you would do. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. He frowned, blinking to make sure he was seeing correctly. There, lying on the ground, surrounded by a tangle of torn clothes and dirt, was a woman. Her body was in a pitiable state, injured, filthy, and clearly abandoned. The sight was disturbing, a brutal contrast to the luxury and bustle of the city around her. James instinctively slowed the car, his eyes locked on the desolate figure. The traffic continued around him, but for James, the world seemed to have stopped. His thoughts raced. The meeting and the time he was losing suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the scene before him. He shifted gears and abruptly parked at the side of the road, the tires screeching in a frenzy that seemed to heighten the gravity of the situation. Without a second thought, James got out of the car and crossed the street, the sound of his shoes echoing on the pavement. His mind was filled with questions and urgency, but in that moment the only thing that mattered was the woman there, vulnerable and alone. As he approached, he crouched down beside her, trying not to be overwhelmed by the unsettling sight. The woman looked up at him with a mix of confusion and pain, her deep, sad eyes seeming to search for an anchor in the midst of the chaos. Without hesitation, James pulled out his phone and called for an ambulance, his voice gentle as he tried to convey calm and reassurance. "Are you okay? What happened to you?" James asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. The woman, gasping for breath and with tears in her eyes, didn't respond immediately, but James could see the struggle in her gaze, a silent battle between pain and hope. While waiting for the paramedics to arrive, James did his best to comfort the woman, offering her his coat and speaking words of encouragement. Time seemed to drag on, each second feeling like an eternity, as he watched the cars and pedestrians pass by, oblivious to the situation he was facing. The city lights reflected in the woman's eyes, and James realized that his business meeting, with all its importance, had completely slipped from his mind. Instead, he was absorbed in the urgency of a situation that was far more personal and immediate. As the sirens grew closer and the paramedics began attending to the woman, James felt a weight in his heart. The carefully planned routine of a day that once seemed so clear had been disrupted by an unexpected encounter that challenged his priorities and his understanding of what truly mattered. The scene was almost surreal. While the city lights continued to flash and the crowd passed by, indifferent, James found himself beside a wounded and vulnerable woman. The sound of the sirens grew louder, but James's decision was far from simple. In the midst of the confusion, he knew that every minute spent there was a minute less for the meeting that could define his future. James looked at the woman, her face pale and eyes filled with pain, and felt a determination that defied logic. The business meeting was important, yes, an opportunity that wouldn't come easily again. But as he faced the suffering in front of him, something within him became clear. The urgency of the moment demanded a type of courage that couldn't be measured in terms of profit or success. Taking a deep breath, he picked up his phone again and called his assistant. "I'm sorry. I won't be able to make it on time. Something came up and I need to stay here." His voice was steady, but there was an underlying tension, an acknowledgement that he was putting everything on the line. As the paramedics finally arrived and began working on the woman, James helped in any way he could. He moved her belongings, cleaned her wounds with the first aid supplies he had in the car, the emergency kit, always a constant in his vehicles, now proving to be a vital resource. He made sure the woman was comfortable and received the care she needed, all without showing his own distress. Every second felt like an eternity as the medical team examined the woman, but James didn't step away. He was fully engaged in a decision that went beyond personal and professional interests. His mind was in turmoil, but his heart was clear about what needed to be done. He looked at the woman's face, now showing relief and gratitude, and felt an inexplicable bond forming between them. The meeting and the future he was sacrificing to help a stranger seemed distant and insignificant compared to the responsibility he felt now. James was experiencing a moment of true courage, not in the heroic sense of grand gestures, but in the simplicity of an act of compassion and humanity in a world that often seemed indifferent. As the ambulance finally departed, taking the woman for further treatment, James stood there for a moment, watching the vehicle disappear into the city traffic. He knew that the meeting, with all its importance, was now a thing of the past. What mattered now was that he had done something meaningful, something that stood out beyond numbers and negotiations. And as he looked out at the city skyline, James realized that on this day, he had found a deeper form of success. As the ambulance pulled away with its lights flashing and sirens cutting through the city's noise, James felt an unexpected emptiness. He had just given up a crucial opportunity, but the weight of what he had done was balanced by a sense of duty fulfilled. Still in a state of shock, he headed to the hospital, following the emergency vehicle with a quiet determination. Upon arrival, James met with the medical team, who were now calmer, and asked to be updated on the condition of Emily, as he had learned she was called. After a brief conversation, the nurse confirmed that Emily was stable and that her treatment was underway. The news brought immediate relief to James, but his curiosity and concern continued to grow. After some time, James was allowed to visit Emily in the recovery room. He entered carefully, finding her in a hospital bed, with bandages and a tired but relieved expression. The room around them was white and cold, but the soft morning light began to fill the space with a comforting calm. James approached slowly, his gentle gaze trying to convey a sense of comfort that words couldn't yet express. "Hi, Emily. How are you feeling?" he asked, his tone soft, almost as if he were speaking to someone he had known for a long time. Emily turned her head slowly, her eyes still a bit uncertain but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you," she murmured, her voice shaky. James smiled encouragingly. "You don't need to thank me. I'm here to listen if you want to talk about what happened." Emily hesitated for a moment, her eyes welling up with tears that she tried to hold back. Finally, she began to speak, her words hesitant but full of emotion. I was running away," she started, her voice breaking. "Running away from an abusive relationship. It was a desperate situation. I didn't know where else to turn." As Emily shared her story, James listened in silence, each word painting a clearer picture of a life marked by pain and struggle. She described a difficult childhood, an adulthood filled with toxic relationships, and the constant battle to stay afloat. Each account seemed to challenge James's perception of the world, a painful reminder that many people's lives were far more complex and challenging than he could have imagined. As the story unfolded, James felt a deep empathy, with Emily's narrative becoming a mirror that reflected the stark contrast between his own successful life and the relentless struggle of someone he had just met. Each detail, each emotion, seemed to connect the dots between what was important and what truly meant making a difference. Emily finished her story with a tired sigh, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I just want a chance to start over," she said, her voice now filled with a fragile determination. "A chance to change my life." James remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of Emily's words and her story. The business meeting, which had seemed so crucial just minutes ago, was now fading into the background. He knew there was something more important to be done, something that could not only change Emily's life but also reshape his own understanding of the true value of humanity and compassion. As the soft hospital light filtered through the window, creating a more welcoming atmosphere, James settled into a chair beside Emily's bed. She seemed to be growing more comfortable, and the environment around them encouraged openness. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the ceiling for a moment before she began to share her story. Each word seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of battles and challenges. "I grew up in a small town," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. "My childhood was difficult. My father drank a lot, and my mother did what she could to keep the family together, but it was always a struggle." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to push aside the painful memories. "The fights were constant. My siblings and I learned to stay away from home as much as we could. James listened carefully as each of Emily's words traced the outline of a life marked by hardships. Emily continued, her voice now a bit stronger. When I was a teenager, things didn't get much better. At 16, I started working to help out at home, but even then, it was never enough. I graduated high school with a part-time job and still struggled to pay the bills. Emily's story painted a vivid picture of a life filled with challenges. She spoke about her first serious relationship, which began with promises of love and stability, but quickly turned into something darker. I thought I had found someone who really cared about me, she said, her eyes filling with tears. But soon, what seemed like affection became control and abuse. Every detail of her relationship with Mark, the abusive partner, was described with painful honesty. Emily recounted the emotional manipulation and the constant cycle of broken promises and crushed hopes. He made me feel like I was nothing without him, Emily revealed, her voice breaking at several points. Every time I tried to stand up, he would pull me back down. At a certain point, Emily's voice became softer, almost a whisper. I finally decided I had to leave. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't live in that prison any longer. I took what little I could carry and left, trying to find a place where I could start over. James felt the impact of Emily's words. The sense of desperation and struggle in her voice was palpable. He saw the woman in front of him as someone who had faced a lifetime of adversity, fought against an endless stream of problems, and yet was still trying to find a way out. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the soft hum of the hospital machines and the occasional distant sound of voices in the hallway. Emily looked at James with a mix of exhaustion and hope. I just want a chance to find a bit of peace, and maybe one day help others who have gone through what I've been through. James, moved by the sincerity and pain in Emily's story, felt something change within him. Emily's story wasn't just a tale of suffering. It was a testament to resilience and the desire for change. Her life had been marked by loss and hardship, but it was also full of a quiet strength that was yearning for a new opportunity. And at that moment, James realized he was witnessing something far greater than just a business meeting. As Emily finished her story, James found himself lost in silent reflection. Her words hung in the air, resonating with an intensity that seemed to challenge the frantic pace of his usual life. Every detail, every exposed emotion, began to echo within him, creating a dissonance between what he had always considered important and the raw reality now before him. The hospital, with its sterile environment and the distant sounds of footsteps and conversations, now seemed like a space for introspection. James looked at Emily, now visibly exhausted, with a new understanding emerging. He saw beyond the image of the wounded woman he had found on the street. He saw an entire life of suffering and struggle, a dark reflection of a reality he had ignored, absorbed in the superficiality of his own routine. James's mind drifted back to the business meeting he had walked away from. He remembered the excitement he had felt while preparing for it, the sleepless nights, and the meticulously crafted plans. The project was undoubtedly important, a golden opportunity that promised to solidify his status and ensure a comfortable future. But as he looked at Emily, the shine of ambition started to seem dull and distant. Emily had exposed the harshness of the world she lived in, a reality where every day was a battle for survival, where hope was a rare and precious thing. And James, faced with this raw truth, began to question whether what he had considered essential was really all that meaningful. He thought about the times he had postponed personal commitments because of work, the endless meetings and the business goals he had pursued with such determination. He had neglected friends, ignored moments of rest, and now it all seemed hollow compared to the life Emily had lived. A life of pain, but also of resilience and hope. Emily's revelation also led James to reflect on his own priorities and the emotional cost of his choices. He had sought success and recognition, but hearing the story of someone who had faced unimaginable suffering made him confront the futility of some of his daily concerns. With each passing minute, the weight of Emily's words began to crystallize into an uncomfortable clarity. James realized that the true impact of her story wasn't just about one person's pain and struggle, It was about the need to reassess what really mattered in his own life. The realization that his relentless pursuit of success might be overshadowing what had real value, empathy, compassion, and human connection, left him feeling not just moved, but deeply transformed. Seeing Emily, with her strength and vulnerability, had awakened something inside him. He began to realize that to make a real difference, he needed to redefine his own priorities and find a balance between personal success and the genuine impact he could have on the lives of those around him. The day was beginning to fade, casting an orange hue over the city that James still watched from the hospital window. The conversation with Emily had ended, and he was alone in a corner of the room, his mind swirling with a storm of thoughts and emotions. The weight of Emily's story was deeply imprinted on his mind, and he knew he needed to make a decision that was more than just a momentary act of compassion. James looked at the woman asleep in the hospital bed, a faint smile on her lips, a reflection of much-needed rest. That moment of peace stood in stark contrast to the inner turmoil James was feeling, now determined to find a way to not just help, but to truly transform Emily's life. He stood up and, without hesitation, picked up his phone. With his mind still processing the impact of Emily's words, he began making calls. First, he called one of his colleagues, an HR specialist who knew the world of employment and opportunities well. "I need a favor. I want to help someone start over. We need to find a job that's right for a person who needs a complete fresh start." The conversation was brief but to the point. He asked her to help find a suitable position for Emily, something that wasn't just a job, but a real opportunity for rebuilding and dignity. He knew that Emily needed a chance to get back on her feet, something more than what a simple, occasional handout could offer. Next, James contacted a local foundation dedicated to supporting victims of abuse and people in vulnerable situations. He explained the situation and offered a significant donation to ensure that Emily had access to psychological support and proper recovery services. "I want her to have the best support possible," he said. "I need to make sure she has the chance to start over with the full support she needs." After the calls, James headed back to the hospital, the weight of the decision he had just made beginning to settle in. He knew he was doing something that went beyond immediate help. He was investing in someone's future, offering Emily a chance not just to survive, but to thrive. When he entered Emily's room again, his expression carried a quiet determination. He approached and sat beside her, his voice filled with a calm certainty. "Emily, I want to help you start over. I'm going to make sure you have a job that allows you to rebuild your life, and I'll also ensure you get all the support you need. This isn't just temporary help. It's a commitment to real change." Emily's eyes slowly opened, and she looked at James with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "You don't have to do this," she began, but James interrupted with a gentle smile. "I want to do this. Your story made me realize that sometimes life gives us the chance to make a real difference, and I'm here to do just that." The silence that followed was filled with a profound feeling, a connection that transcended words. James knew he was making a decision that would not only change Emily's life, but also redefine his own view of success and humanity. He was committed to turning the emotional impact of his experience into concrete, lasting action, creating a new perspective for both of them, a path to recovery and a future full of possibilities. The next morning brought new hope to the hospital, a stark contrast to the night of reflection and decision James had gone through. He arrived with renewed energy, determined to fulfill the promise he had made to Emily. In his hand, he carried a folder with documents and a smile that seemed to reflect the sunlight beginning to stream through the hospital window. Emily was awake when James entered the room, her face lit by a subtle glow of anticipation. Her recovery was going well, and she seemed a bit stronger, a testament to the courage and resilience James so admired. He approached Emily's bed, his expression serious but kind. "Good morning, Emily. I have something important for you." Carefully, he opened the folder and took out an envelope, placing it gently on the table beside her bed. Emily looked at the envelope with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tinged with growing anticipation. "Inside this envelope," James began, "are the details of a new job I found for you. It's a position I believe will be perfect for you. And it's not just a job. It's an opportunity to start over and rebuild your life." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. She took the envelope with trembling hands, her expression a mix of uncertainty and hope. As she opened the envelope and began to read, James watched, his own anxiety turning into a sincere desire to see her reaction. "You're being hired as an assistant at a non-profit organization that's dedicated to helping people start over," James explained. "The position offers not only a fair salary but also a supportive environment and a team that understands and values your journey." As Emily read the details, tears began to fall, mingling with a smile that seemed to release an immense emotional burden. I don't know how to thank you," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. James smiled, his own heart warmed by the transformation he was witnessing. "You don't need to thank me. What you need to do now is believe in yourself and take full advantage of this new opportunity. Your strength and courage have brought you this far, and I'm sure you have everything you need to thrive." With a voice now filled with new determination, Emily began to express her gratitude. "I never imagined anyone would care this much, especially a stranger. This means more to me than words can describe." As they talked, James made sure to clarify that the help didn't stop there. "I've also arranged a continuous support plan for you, including access to guidance and resources you might need during this transition. I want to make sure you have everything you need to truly start over." The conversation between them became a celebration of a new chapter in Emily's life. With every word and gesture, James was contributing to something much greater than just an act of charity. He was building a bridge to a future filled with hope and new possibilities. When the visit ended and James stood up to leave, Emily's eyes were now filled with renewed confidence. "I'm going to do my best to make the most of this opportunity," she promised, her voice firm and full of gratitude. James left the hospital with the feeling that he had been part of something deeply meaningful. Emily's fate had changed in a tangible and positive way, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose in his own life, a commitment to true transformation and genuine empathy. Weeks had passed since the day James offered Emily the opportunity that could transform her life. He continued to closely follow her progress, watching with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity as she began to settle into her new job and rebuild her life. The impact of his actions had been profound, but the real transformation was happening within James. On that quiet afternoon, James decided to take a solitary walk through the city, a necessary break to reflect on the path he had taken. As he walked through the busy streets, his gaze was distant, lost in thoughts that were not his usual financial calculations and business plans. Instead, he was absorbed in the realization of the true importance of human connections and the impact that an act of empathy can have. He passed by squares and cafes where he observed people interacting, laughing and talking. Every small moment of connection between strangers, friends, and families now seemed to carry a deeper meaning. James wondered if, before, he had overlooked the beauty and importance of these human interactions, being too focused on his own pursuit of material success. The walk led him to a quiet park, where he sat on a bench, watching the leaves fall from the trees and the birds singing in the branches. The serenity of the surroundings contrasted with the emotional whirlwind he felt inside. He thought about Emily and how she had changed his perspective so significantly. The process of helping her had not only transformed her life but also triggered a personal introspection that James had not anticipated. The sense of fulfillment James was experiencing no longer came from business success or material achievements. It was the pure and deep joy of having contributed to something that truly made a difference. He realized that by offering a helping hand, he was connecting with the most genuine side of humanity, and that connection was more rewarding than any award or recognition he could achieve. James's mind was filled with reflections on the true nature of his own choices. He understood that in his relentless pursuit of achievements and status, he had lost sight of what really mattered: meaningful relationships and the ability to positively impact the lives of others. Helping Emily had shown him the value of small actions, the power of an altruistic gesture, and the deep satisfaction that comes from genuinely caring for others. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, James stood up from the bench with a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to bring this new perspective into all aspects of his life. Human connections, he realized, were the true treasure he had neglected. The path James had now chosen was guided by a new understanding. He was committed not only to seeking success in his ventures, but also to creating opportunities for others to thrive, just as Emily had. It was a new journey, one that valued the true essence of human relationships and the profound impact that an act of kindness can have. With a smile on his face and a newfound determination in his heart, James began walking back to the city, ready to face the future with a transformed perspective and a renewed commitment to making a difference in the lives of those around him. What would you do in James's place? Would you have helped Emily, or would you have kept going without looking back? Comment below what you would do, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.